Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Premier Eby will take a few questions from reporters on the phone first, and then we'll go to a few opportunities here on the site. Just a reminder to media on the phone that they may now press *1 to queue up, and you can stay off mute. You are not audible until we call you to the podium. We are going to start with Rob Shaw, Check News.
Okay, just before Rob starts, if you don't mind, I just wanted to say in British Columbia we're facing a rapidly escalating wildfire situation. Many parts of our province are in significant drought right now, and we're seeing levels of drought in our province that we usually don't see until much later in the summer. We had significant lightning storms that have resulted in ignition of a number of new fires. I just wanted to say and express my appreciation for the hardworking wildfire service in British Columbia that's out there on the front lines right now. We're receiving international assistance from other jurisdictions, including Mexico and the United States, fighting these fires. I want to express my appreciation to those international firefighters who are on the front lines with British Columbians fighting these fires. We're very grateful for that. We have contracted additional air resources to be able to fight these fires across the province, and we expect further international firefighters to come on to assist us as well. So to British Columbians who are involved, who are facing potential evacuation, who are in a state of emergency, we are bringing on those resources to support you and your communities to fight these fires, and we do expect long days ahead. The federal government has noted that we expect this to be nationally the worst fire season in 100 years, and we don't expect that British Columbia will be the exception to that rule, given where we are right now. With that, I'll turn it back over to you. Thanks.
Yeah. So, Rob Shaw, Check News, please.
Hi, Premier. Just following on that, I think it was your transportation minister who had talked earlier about some sort of federal disaster financial relief from Ottawa on the fire season, and that might be something nationally that other premiers were interested in as well. Could you talk about if you have a request there that you're going to bring up at the table, what that would do for BC during this season and what you would get out of it that you need?
Well, I think it's perhaps helpful to note for British Columbians and for Canadians that we've already spent, I think we're probably nearing $200 million fighting fires so far this season. To give an idea of the scale of the work that's happening here to fight fires in the province. That is in addition to, obviously, the expenditure of keeping our fire service on year-round so that we can be prepared, as we were, for the fire season starting earlier. Certainly, we're always looking for a strong federal partner to support us in these escalating costs related to climate change and the impact on BC's climate, as we see drier, hotter summers and the fires burning hotter and deeper into the ground, making it harder to fight them. So it's a challenging time, certainly for us in British Columbia. We've seen, though, in Nova Scotia, in Alberta, in Quebec, major challenges related to forest fires as well. We're all looking to the federal government to partner when we face these emergencies, and we'll continue to do that.
Rob, did you have a follow-up?
Sure. On affordability, is there a request from Ottawa you're hoping to rally other premiers around on affordability or assistance? I know we have the Bank of Canada expected to hike rates again tomorrow. MNP had a report yesterday that Canadians reporting insolvency is hitting a record high. There's a jump in the number of people in BC, $200 or less away from being unable to pay their bills. Is there something you want from the federal government on affordability? And is there anything you're preparing provincially that's new on that file?
Well, I think there are a lot of British Columbians that are looking at the money that they make each month and seeing that there's less and less of it left at the end of the month. and many people wondering how they're going to pay the debts they have with rising interest rates, cover their rent, buy groceries with rising costs. This is an issue that we're seeing across Canada. I'm certainly hearing from my colleagues that in other provinces, people are struggling with the same kinds of costs. And our conversation around the table, one of the topics we'll be talking about, we haven't gotten there yet, is housing and housing-related costs, making sure that that monthly rent bill or the cost of getting into market housing is actually attainable and affordable for people. It's one of their biggest expenses that they face. Like other premiers around the table, I have a real sense of dread about the next Bank of Canada rate hike. I think that the impact on British Columbians is pretty profound. Our housing is already very significantly more expensive than other parts of the country. People have bigger mortgages that they're trying to service. The impacts are significant. The businesses in British Columbia that were already hit by the pandemic, that borrowed money to get through the pandemic, seeing their costs increase as a result. I think that there is a strong argument to make that the rate increases are having their effect. But it seems to be having the effect on people who can least afford it. And so certainly this is an ongoing challenge that we're going to continue to face in British Columbia across the country. We are having discussions around the table, cost of living as one of our major topics. And certainly I am looking forward to, as our British Columbians, how we can work together on the issue of housing nationally as one of those affordability issues.
Our next question is Richard Zuzman, Global News.
Thanks for doing this. First Nations leadership in the province does not have confidence right now in Minister Mesquite's ability to lead MCFD, given that 70% of the children in youth and foster homes are Indigenous. Will you replace her as minister if she doesn't step down?
Well, I've been meeting with First Nations leadership, with the First Nations Leadership Council, since British Columbians learned about the horrific case involving 2 young kids in our province that were in foster care, that were not just profoundly neglected, but were also functionally, at the end of the day, tortured. One of them died. Horrific case. Shook all of us, shook me. I know Minister Dean was profoundly affected. Obviously, Indigenous community members across the province profoundly affected by this, reactivated all kinds of trauma related to our child welfare system and its history in the province. As a result, I've had now 2 meetings with leadership to go through and present them with the details of where the child welfare system is at right now. Particulars of this case, where they were interested in going into those details. There has been a request from the First Nation particularly affected that we refrain from further media statements related to this. Broadly, though, I can say that the solution to this and the answer to challenges like this is to ensure that First Nations have jurisdiction over their own kids, that they are able to, that they're supported to by the province, by the federal government, to be able to do that work for their own children. And that's where we're going. That's the work that Minister Dean and her team have been focused on from the beginning. And my hope is to work with the leadership to get to the place where we agree on a clear path forward. We're doing that work, and there's more work yet to do.
Richard, did you have a follow-up?
I do. There's a major LNG conference going on in Vancouver this week. Are you concerned at all that we will not have enough power to power LNG development in the province, considering the way that we've earmarked energy generated from Site C?
Yeah, it's a really important time for our province because we have a huge advantage. When I'm having conversations with other premiers from across the country, they understand that British Columbia is very well positioned with clean electricity. We have a massive hydroelectric resource in our province that supports us being able to generate electricity for all kinds of different industries and to add to it with sustainable, renewable sources of energy like wind and solar, because we've got the big batteries in the form of the hydro dams in our province. I am not at all confident that our province is on track to provide the level of electricity needed to transition industry from fossil fuel usage to electricity. We did a power call up the Northwest, which included LNG plants, but also included major mines. I'm having conversations with the Premier of the Yukon that's very interested in an intertie with British Columbia, with the conversations with the Port of Prince Rupert about their interest in electrifying, and hydro is not keeping up. It takes 8 to 9 years to fulfill a request from industry for the kind of electricity that they're looking for. It takes about the same time to go through the call for power all the way through to generation and transmission. We have to speed that up. So that's why we have a BC Hydro task force that's working with the board right now at BC Hydro to ensure that we deliver faster, that we take advantage of the economic opportunity that we have to clean up industry, help them get off fossil fuels, meet our climate targets, all sectors, LNG, mining, other resource industries, the port, and also provide exports to support our neighbors, Alberta, the Yukon, Washington State, who want to get their emissions down as well, and that we can support in doing that work.
Next question is Lisa Usda, City News.
Hi there, Premier. Talking about Surrey, I guess first, when should the community expect a resolution from the province about what's going to happen with the police force there?
I think, the people of Surrey are tired of the issue of policing dominating the discussion of the fastest growing city that has huge needs around housing, infrastructure, other pieces of work to do with the province. Certainly, I feel the fatigue as well. And we're looking forward to resolution of this issue with the City of Surrey. The Minister of Public Safety and his team are reviewing the work that was produced by the City of Surrey in order to respond to the demands that they hit certain requirements in order to be able to transition back to the RCMP after transitioning to municipal force, including potential costs for the public. All of that work is happening. I can say that I have reviewed those materials myself as well. I've entered into the non-disclosure agreement to be able to do that. So I can't speak about what they presented, but I can advise that the Minister for Public Safety and his team have been reviewing it, and I expect them to have a decision for the City of Surrey as soon as possible, because we all want a conclusion to this matter.
Lisa, did you have a follow-up?
I do, and with that situation, I'm just wondering what your concerns are about the increasing animosity between the mayor in particular and the Surrey Police Force, should that end up being the police force that remains, how that working relationship will go when it's degraded substantially.
Well, there's a critically important value at stake here, which is that when someone in Surrey calls 911 for a police officer, that someone attends. And it doesn't matter what badge they wear, that call is answered. It's answered professionally. The person gets the support that they need. And I think that the strains caused by the decision to go to a municipal force and then go back to the RCMP, but within the community, within the City Council, between various actors, it has not been great for Surrey, to put it lightly. And so having resolution on this, being able to move forward so that those wounds can heal and we can move on is critically important for the City of Surrey, for the people of Surrey, and for the provincial government, because there are many, many issues for us to deal with together.
Next question is sorry. I'll take questions from the room shortly. Just a moment, sorry. Dirk Messner, Canadian Press.
Wondering if the port strike in British Columbia has come up in your discussions with your colleagues and what you possibly could do about it.
I've had a number of informal conversations with my colleagues from across Canada about the port strike in British Columbia. British Columbians, I know, are concerned about the impact of the port strike. First of all, it's a significant employer, so the strike itself has economic impact for families in the province. We're as reliant as other provinces on exports from that port to the Asia-Pacific region and around the world. Beyond that, in my conversations with premiers, of course, They're seeing huge impacts. The Premier of Saskatchewan, major potash producers are curtailing production because of the port strike. The Premier of Alberta has expressed concern as well. All of us are unified in the goal that this get resolved as quickly as possible. It has knock-on impacts on cost of living for people across the country as goods get more expensive because imports are not available, and it's really the worst time for that. We also know in British Columbia, where the port is, that port workers have seen increasing costs just like everybody else. Those workers need to be treated with respect. And what we want is a long-term deal that's going to last and that's going to prevent disruptions like this from happening in the future. And those kinds of deals are reached at the bargaining table. We're encouraging both parties, the employer and the workers, to be at the table working that out, and the federal government to be involved in advancing that discussion as well.
Kirk, did you have a follow-up?
Sure. Thanks for that, Premier. Is there any chance that the premiers could ask for for some kind of statement to say we need a deadline on when this needs to be resolved or should be resolved?
The common understanding, and certainly my understanding, is that we all want this to be resolved as quickly as possible. We want it resolved today, of course, and so the sooner that this can get resolved, the better.
Next question is Katie DeRosa, Vancouver Sun.
Hi, Premier. Regarding the housing funding that was largely not in the federal budget, I know that there's the BC is working on the BC Builds plan on affordable housing. Does that plan largely rely on federal money? Like, can you build the affordable housing that you promised during your leadership campaign without those federal funds? And what will that message be to the federal government regarding the funding for affordable housing?
We have yet to have the conversation around the table upstairs about housing, but I can say certainly for British Columbia, we're not waiting for the federal government on housing, and our BC Builds initiative and our housing strategy as a whole is not reliant on federal money. We would love it for federal programs to be aligned with our programs. It's been a consistent message we've delivered, because it just makes sense to British Columbians that if government using tax dollars to support attainable and affordable housing is at the table, we should be working together. We can provide more affordability if our programs align and work together than we can if we have two separate programs that provide a little bit of affordability instead of a unified program that provides significantly more. There's lots of opportunities for us to work together. That's been our consistent message with the federal government. And I really hope we can get there.
On the matter of time, sorry, Lisa, do you have a follow-up? Not Lisa, Katie.
Yes,
sorry, I'm messing it up. Sorry.
Of bill reform, we haven't seen Ottawa call the bill before the session ended. Have you received any assurances that they were going to do that when the fall sitting resumes, or do you think are you worried that legislation will just peter off and not be called?
The bail reform is one of the key items of discussion that we have yet to have, but will have around the table today. For British Columbia's perspective, we were profoundly disappointed that the federal government did not call that bill, that it didn't pass. We try to communicate the urgency of it. When our prosecutors are asking, when they see someone who's a threat to the community, they say that person should be held in jail to await their trial. They ask the judge for that. They only do that in the most serious cases where the public's confidence in the justice system is at risk. Only half of the time are they getting that order that the person be held in jail under the federal bail rules. And so our prosecutors can ask for it, but the judges are applying the federal law. And we need the federal law, and every single province and territory agrees on this. We need the federal law to be reflective of the values of British Columbians and Canadians, that communities are safe and that the justice system act in their interests. And that's just not happening right now. And so profoundly frustrated that didn't happen. I'm glad it'll be one of the key topics of conversation upstairs, which I will go up to and join very shortly.
Thank you. So in the matter of time, because Premier needs to go back, I'll give one question for each reporter on site. Please introduce yourself and your outlet.
Ashley Burke, CBC News. When it comes to healthcare, is that new federal funding flowing? How are you implementing it in your province? Have you met the conditions? And what exactly are the next steps you're talking to premiers about today?
We've met all of the, for British Columbians, they want to see us working cooperatively with the federal government on a healthcare system to respond to the crisis they see. And frankly, it's not enough healthcare workers right now is our biggest challenge in British Columbia, and it seems to be an issue faced across Canada, consistently with other premiers. In terms of the federal funding, we've met all the requirements. We've provided the plans, the health human resources strategies, the seniors aging with dignity submissions, all of these various requirements the federal government put on us. We're happy to fill out the paperwork and get it done. The key is that we have a strong federal partner at the table in the healthcare system, which is obviously still under strain. How do we use the immigration system to support the healthcare that British Columbians need? How do we use the federal government's national authority to set standards around the mobility of healthcare workers? There are lots of important pieces of work to do. We've had a good discussion around the table about that, and the communique will reflect that, as will our comments later. Yes, we're moving along with the federal government on the funding piece.
Question about where the forest fire and the affordability file converges, and that's in terms of climate policy. Your colleagues from Atlantic Canada, Premier Smith as well, speaking out strongly against some of the federal moves, the price mechanisms put in place on the clean fuel standard, carbon taxes, long opponents of that. But if you take the market mechanism away, to incentivize the use of cleaner, greener fuels, does that really work then if the federal government is offsetting the way they're asking for all these higher costs? Where does BC stand on this?
Well, British Columbians have been supporting carbon pricing in the province for a while, and it's part of our climate strategy. It's a key part of our climate strategy that has political backing in the province from the people of BC, because they're on the front lines of climate change. When we have the drought that we're having right now this summer and the beginning of what looks to be a particularly terrible forest fire season in BC, they also see nationally what we've seen over the last few years in terms of smoky summers in our cities because of forest fires starting to hit in other provinces as well. I think that one of the reasons why British Columbians support these kinds of initiatives is because they are seeing the impacts directly, the pine beetle overwintering, the flooding, atmospheric river events, the forest fires. The costs are very real right now in British Columbia. We will continue to play that, what we see as a leadership role on climate change. We will support a price on carbon. We think that's important. Carbon pollution shouldn't be free. And so those kinds of mechanisms will encourage fuel switching. It's one of the reasons why industry is so enthusiastic in our province to switch to electricity away from fossil fuels, and why we want to support them in that by building out our electrical infrastructure. I think that concern about cost of living is one that's shared across Canada, and how we get there, how we address those issues, finding those points of common agreement are going to be critical at the table.
Please introduce yourself in your outlet before your question.
Sure. Sébastien Desrosiers from Radio-Canada. Hi. So premiers from Quebec and Ontario asked the federal government yesterday to reopen the bidding for the replacement of warplanes Aurora. They want to see Canadian companies such as Bombardier, be able to bid on the contract, which Ottawa seems to be willing to give to Boeing. Considering you have a Boeing plant in British Columbia, what do you think about their proposal? Are you willing to talk about it? And do you think companies such as Bombardier should be able to bid on such contracts?
Well, if the federal government is looking to increase spending on defense, spending on issues of Arctic sovereignty, for example, deploying technology in this regard, there are a number of Canadian companies that are very well suited across the country to provide those kinds of services. British Columbians are really proud the companies that are in our province, and federal government procurement has resulted in significant employment in our province related to defense. We have major shipbuilding contracts in North Vancouver that are employing hundreds of people and producing high-quality ships that are going to benefit Canadians for generations to come. There is no reason why that work has to be limited to shipbuilding. There is a huge ability in our province and across Canada to provide these necessary services. I am fully supportive of the call of Quebec and other provinces to the federal government to use their procurement process, like other countries do in relation to defense, to build up Canadian companies, to build up opportunities for Canadian companies. And I think that's great news for British Columbians, it's great news for Canadians, and I frankly don't see a downside to them being quite aggressive in supporting Canadian companies to get this work done.
And our last question, please.
Yes, Thomas Laberge for CP. Just a follow-up from the question from my colleague. So do you think you will be able to get a consensus from all the premier about this topic of Bombardier?
We haven't yet addressed this issue at the table today, so I'll refrain from commenting on it until we've had a chance to discuss it at the table about what the table's position is, because I don't know what it is yet.
And that's all we have time for today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.